What's up, guys? Today we are chatting about an amazing little ground cover. It is called Dymondia margarita, commonly known as silver carpet. I'm going to show you ways to use it in the landscape, including how to use it as a lawn alternative. Ready, go. Dymondia is becoming more and more popular these days, especially as water restrictions are tightening up, especially here in California and throughout the Southwest. More people are wanting to get away from the idea of a traditional fescue or St. Augustine lawn and go to alternative plants like this one. Now, this is a plant more for the warmer climate, folks. Sorry, cold climate guys. I'll give you some suggestions towards the end of the video. I'm gonna show you guys how to plant it as a lawn alternative in just a minute, but let's take a closer look at the Dymondia. Check this out. You can see that it stays super tight to the ground, getting only about 2, maybe 3 inches at the absolute max. And each plant will spread to about 12 inches wide. The top of the leaf is a beautiful grayish green tone, and the underside of the leaf is a contrasting white color. And it creates that silvery tone that is in the name, silver carpet. When it does fill in, it creates a beautiful, dense mat of foliage. And one of the best things about this is you can walk on it. It can take a fair amount of foot traffic by adults and kids, and yes, even pets. Big dogs that like to run around and create a lot of havoc, Dymondia will probably not hold up very well in that condition. Now, in terms of watering, it takes much less water than your traditional lawn, but you still get that beautiful look of an open lawn-like area. Once it's established, it's incredibly drought tolerant, but for the first 6 months or so, while it's filling in and while it's establishing a good root system, it does like regular water. I do actually like to use an edging for the Dymondia, like a composite or steel edging. That just gives you a nice clean border to work with. And you can feel free to let it creep out beyond that if you want, but it does really look nice with a clean edge to it. All right, before we get into some of the other uses, let's look at the quick facts. Dymondia is best in USDA zones 9 through 11. Dymondia is an evergreen ground cover. It'll get about 2 to 3 inches tall max by about 12 inches wide. Plant it in full sun to light shade. Watering needs are regular while establishing, but low once established. Dymondia is native to South Africa. Bloom time is late spring to summer. And in other notes, Dymondia is low maintenance, will attract butterflies, drought and deer tolerant, and also tolerant of coastal conditions. So how are we going to use Dymondia in the landscape? Well, let's look at the most popular use, and that is as a lawn alternative. So we talked about edging. That is gonna be your first determining factor, is where do you want the Dymondia to be? Set your edge or border first, and that can be composite or steel or even pressure treated wood. Now, if you're gonna do an irrigation system, which I highly recommend, you can use an overhead spray system just like you would for grass, or drip tubing that has evenly spaced drip emitters. Just make sure you have even disbursement of water. That's a key ingredient for even and healthy growth. And it's nice to bury the tube at least halfway in the ground so you don't see it protruding up through the Dymondia. Now you can take your square footage of the space you want to use it in. Dymondia is typically sold in flats, and generally there are about 49 individual plants within that flat. 7 rows of 7. So based on that, you can calculate how many flats you need for any given square footage. And I personally recommend to plant it 6 inches on center. So not edge to edge, but the center of each individual plant. Now, with a 6-inch spacing, each flat will cover approximately 12 square feet. So for instance, if your space is 300 square feet, just divide that 300 by 12, and you have 25 flats. Down in the description below, I will put the spacing associated with the square footage that each flat will cover. So now that you figured out how many flats you need, you will have to prepare the soil, and that includes rototilling in a nice soil amendment in most cases, especially for those heavier soil folks. A nice loamy and sandy mix is really ideal for Dymondia. Do not skimp on this step. This is absolutely a must. And after you prep, you're gonna wanna grade about a 1/2 inch below your adjacent hardscape or edging. And that's going to allow for the growth of the Dymondia. And once you've rototilled and prepped and graded your soil, it is now time to plant. Remove the plants from the flat, and you can pull the individual plants apart and then set them where they need to go first. This will help you get a nice layout that you can adjust as needed based on your intended spacing. And you'll want to space the plants at least 6 inches off the adjacent hardscape surface or edging. This will allow for lateral growth. Now that everything is laid out, get your small hand pick and just pop those in the ground. And I personally like using a claw hammer for this. It's got a little bit more weight to it, and kind of just press around the plant to make sure they're nice and evenly set in the soil. Now, if you have a larger area that you're working with, you may have to stop intermittently and water the plants that you just planted. You want to be careful to not let them dry out. And after you're done, you can just sit back and relax and wait for these guys to grow in. Now, stylistically, how can we use Dymondia? Well, in my opinion, it's very cross-stylistic. You can use it in everything from informal, cottage, craftsman, traditional, ranch, modern. I've seen it used in nearly every style and it just works. In more informal landscapes, I see it used quite often between irregular shaped flagstone pieces and it looks spectacular. It just makes your pathway feel softer and kind of cozy and whimsical. It's just fun to use it like that. Now you can also use gravel and other kinds of plants in between the stepping stones like thyme or Ruchia nana. And if you have not yet seen the video on Ruchia nana, click the link above. It is another incredible ground cover. Now, modern architecture, that has clean, straight lines. And this is one of those scenarios where you might want to keep it edged more frequently to maintain that linear cleanliness. And again, you do see it used between stepping stones, but in a modern application, those stones will probably be square or have a tighter geometry to them. As a more informal landscape, that's gonna be, irregular shaped and more organic kinds of forms. Now, let's talk about parkways or curb strips for a minute. Generally, a problematic area, right? And it's just kind of an area of the landscape that sort of just gets forgotten. Dymondia is a great solution because it can take some light foot traffic, it stays low to the ground so you can traverse across it and just create a nice aesthetic look. Because think about it, the parkway is sort of your first thing that you see from the street, and that is really part of your curb appeal for your house. So don't let that parkway be forgotten. If it starts to sort of creep over onto the hardscape or over the curb, just edge it as desired. It's very easily kept inside its intended border, and no mowing. Maintenance is very, very low on this. Now, Dymondia does spread, but it is not invasive. It does not self-sow or aggressively propagate itself. It doesn't spread seeds or spores everywhere. It's a very non-invasive plant, but yet it spreads easily enough to cover and blanket a space. Now, for you colder climate folks, woolly thyme is fantastic. It stays super low to the ground, and isotoma is a beautiful little lawn replacing ground cover that will give you a ton of flowers. And finally, Carex divalsa creates a gorgeous meadow-like look for your landscape and can be a great lawn replacing alternative. And that wraps us up for Dymondia. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today on yet another video. If you're on YouTube, hit that like, subscribe, and bell notification. I will see you guys on the next one, and as always, happy planting.